This island, just 100 miles off the coast of mainland China. Rugged mountains, neon-lit cities, high-tech factories, and 23 million people living in one of Asia's most vibrant democracies. But to Beijing, this isn't a country, it's unfinished business. A rebellious province that must return to the fold, peacefully or by force. Over the past few years, this quiet stretch of ocean, the Taiwan Strait, has transformed into one of the world's most dangerous flashpoints. Chinese warplanes cross into Taiwan's air defense zone almost daily. Naval drills encircle the island, missiles scream into nearby waters, and across the Pacific, the United States watches closely, pledging to help Taiwan defend itself if it comes under attack. But in doing so, it risks direct confrontation with another nuclear-armed superpower. Taiwan sits at the center of global semiconductor supply chains. It lies on a critical shipping route that fuels economies from Japan to Europe. It anchors America's presence in the Pacific, and it stands as a symbol of democracy on China's doorstep. A war here wouldn't just be about borders. It would ripple across global markets, alliances, and military theaters, pulling in players far beyond Asia. Because the moment China moves on Taiwan, the world will be forced to respond. So the question is no longer far-fetched. It's not science fiction. It's a scenario that military planners, world leaders, and economists are gaming out in classified briefings and war rooms right now. What happens if China invades Taiwan? And could that one decision spiral into World War III? The tensions over Taiwan today have their roots in the final stage of the Chinese Civil War. In 1949, after years of brutal fighting, Mao Zedong's communist forces claimed victory on the mainland and declared the founding of the People's Republic of China, or PRC. The defeated nationalist government retreated across the Taiwan Strait to the island of Taiwan, taking with it soldiers, officials, and the political system of the old Republic of China. At first, both sides claimed to represent all of China, but as decades passed, those ambitions began to diverge. On the mainland, Beijing held firmly to the idea that Taiwan must one day be unified with the rest of China. In Taiwan, the reality shifted towards self-governance, first under authoritarian rule and later as a vibrant democracy. From Beijing's perspective, Taiwan is not a separate country. It is a renegade province and an inseparable part of China. Chinese leaders say this reunification is a historical inevitability, a core part of what Xi Jinping calls the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. They see it as a matter of sovereignty, national pride, and historical justice. And they have made it clear, while they prefer peaceful unification, they have never renounced the use of force. Taiwan, however, has taken a very different path. Over the last few decades, it transformed from a one-party state under martial law into a thriving, multi-party democracy. Elections are competitive, political debate is open, and the press operates freely. This democratic identity has become central to how its people see themselves. Public opinion reflects this shift. Most people in Taiwan now identify as Taiwanese, not Chinese, a change that is especially strong among younger generations, particularly after seeing the erosion of freedoms in Hong Kong under that arrangement. For many, Hong Kong's experience stands as a warning of what unification under Beijing could mean. There's also a policy gap that keeps tensions high. Washington follows a one-China policy. It recognizes Beijing as China's government, but maintains unofficial ties with Taiwan and, under US law, provides defensive arms. But Beijing insists on a one-China principle. that Taiwan is an inalienable part of China. That difference, policy versus principle, creates constant friction. Taiwan's leaders are careful to navigate this reality. Their approach is to maintain the current status quo, remaining self-governed without declaring formal independence, while quietly building stronger defenses and deepening ties with friendly countries. The message is consistent. Taiwan's future must be decided by its own people. It's a delicate balance, asserting their right to choose without crossing Beijing's red lines. But Taiwan's significance goes far beyond politics and identity. Economically, it is a critical link in global trade and technology. The island makes the vast majority of the world's most advanced semiconductors, over 90% by many estimates, largely at TSMC. These chips power everything from smartphones and electric cars to AI systems and advanced military equipment. If Taiwan's chip production were suddenly disrupted by war, blockade, or political crisis, the effects would be immediate and worldwide. Industries would grind to a halt, prices would surge, and supply chains would fracture. The shock could trigger one of the worst global economic crises in modern history, touching every corner of life, from the availability of consumer electronics to the readiness of advanced weapons systems. This combination of history, identity, and economic importance is what makes Taiwan's future so critical. It is more than a local dispute between two sides of the Taiwan Strait. It is a question with consequences for the balance of power, the stability of global markets, and the future of democratic self-rule in the 21st century. So if this isn't open war, why does it feel like one? Taiwan lives in a kind of permanent storm, not of missiles or bombs, but of pressure. The Chinese military calls it training. Strategists call it gray zone warfare, constant coercion that stops just short of a formal war but never lets up. Warplanes and Navy ships circle the island almost every day. They don't cross far enough to trigger a fight, but far enough that Taiwan must react. Every scramble burns fuel, wears down aircraft, and exhausts crews. When a political flashpoint hits, say a US arms sale or a high-level visit, the tempo changes. Patrols increase, live fire drills pop up in surrounding waters, high-altitude balloons drift overhead, cyber probes hum quietly in the background. Online, coordinated posts push rumors, blackouts, leadership rifts, secret deals, anything that chips at public trust. The goal isn't headlines, the goal is fatigue. Make Taiwan spend time, fuel, spare parts, and mental focus just to keep daily life running. So what does a normal day inside this pressure cooker look like? Before dawn, Chinese fighter jets slip across the median line, the informal boundary down the strait that both sides mostly respected for decades. Electronic warfare planes buzz the edges of Taiwan's radar picture. Farther back, refueling tankers loiter to keep the package aloft. Taiwan's air defenses light up. Pilots sprint to cockpits. Minutes later, jets roar into the sky, burning through fuel before the workday begins. By mid-morning, Chinese Coast Guard cutters show up near key shipping routes. Behind them, fishing vessels, often tied to China's maritime militia, loiter close to cargo lanes, forcing Taiwan's Coast Guard to shadow them. The moves are small, but they pull people and ships off other tasks. At noon, Beijing issues a bland-sounding navigation warning, a temporary safety zone near a port or airway. On paper, it's routine. In practice, it delays flights and reroutes container ships. Every hour a ship waits is money lost, schedules broken, and supply chains strained. By afternoon, a rumor floods social media. A fabricated leak about a government crisis, a food shortage, or a cyber breach. Ministries scramble to respond, but the myth outruns the correction. Trust erodes, maybe just a little, but day after day, it adds up. Late evening, a small cyber attack hits a utility or port network. Not enough to make international news, but enough to keep engineers and commanders up all night. And then before dawn, it starts again. Here's the danger. The more often jets, ships, and electronic warfare systems operate this close, the higher the chance something goes wrong. One pilot overcorrects. One captain turns too sharp. One radar locks on a second too long. Suddenly, a routine patrol becomes an incident, a collision, a shoot-down, a spark. And in the Taiwan Strait, a spark can travel far. The United States is legally committed to help Taiwan defend itself. Japan and Australia have security ties that pull them toward the fight. China has tied national pride to stopping separatism. If a miscalculation draws blood, political pressure on all sides to respond could be overwhelming. The gray zone may be a war without open fire, but it is a war of endurance. The longer it runs, the more it primes the region for the day someone, somewhere, pushes just a little too far. That's why a date keeps showing up in briefings: 2027. For years, Chinese leaders have said Taiwan will eventually be brought under Beijing's control. Under Xi Jinping, that idea feels less distant and more personal. In his 2025 New Year message, he leaned in again. People on both sides are one family, and reunification cannot be stopped. That phrasing matters. It signals direction, if not a date. Inside planning circles, 1 year keeps showing up: 2027. It's not a promise to invade, it's a readiness target, the point by which the People's Liberation Army should have the option to act if ordered. But let's be clear, if China is pouring resources into being ready, it's because they want the option on the table. And if that option exists, it means Beijing is at least thinking seriously about using it. So, what exactly are they building and preparing to reach that point? Let's break it down into the 3 main tracks. Pressure now. The gray zone pressure continues. Patrols, blockade-like drills, cyberattacks, and propaganda, all to wear Taiwan down and make PLA presence feel routine. Tools in place. Beijing keeps upgrading missiles, aircraft, ships, and logistics. One example you'll hear more about: experimental water bridge barges, jack-up platforms that plant steel legs on the seabed and unfold long causeways over reefs, so heavy vehicles can roll ashore without a traditional port. Analysts see potential, but also a big caveat. Once spotted, these slow, tall systems become high-priority targets. Signals abroad. Deep in China's deserts, satellite images show full-scale mock-ups of US warships, even an aircraft carrier, mounted on rail tracks, so targets can move. The message isn't subtle. If the US and partners get close, they'll be targeted. If Taiwan's leadership stands firm, it's in the playbook. These aren't hidden preparation. China isn't trying to conceal them, which makes the signal more powerful. They want Washington to see this. For Americans, the takeaway is balance. 2027 is a clock, not a prophecy, but clocks influence behavior. The more complete China's toolkit looks, the more pressure Taiwan feels, and the more the US and allies must prepare in public to keep deterrence credible. A Taiwan war wouldn't be one big beach landing. It would be a layered contest: sea, air, cyber, space, logistics, where timing matters as much as firepower. China's plan: hit fast, keep help out. The PLA fields the world's largest Navy by hull count and a deep bench of missiles designed to make the region dangerous for outsiders. You'll hear the term A2/AD, anti-access/area denial. Plain English, make skies and seas so risky that US and allied forces stay back. Think long-range ballistic and cruise missiles to threaten air bases and ships, stealth J-20 fighters and bombers for standoff strikes, dense air defenses, and persistent surveillance from space and over-the-horizon radars. Amphibious lift is still the hard part. That's why you see experiments like the water bridge concept, and the heavy use of civilian roll-on roll-off ferries to surge vehicles if sea lanes are briefly secured. Taipei can't match China platform for platform, so it aims to make an invasion slow, costly, and uncertain. Mobile coastal anti-ship missiles hide in forests and cities. F-16V fighters, air defenses, and hardened command sites try to ride out early strikes. Minefields and pre-planned kill zones turn the few good beaches into traps. Civil defense and reserves focus on keeping power, water, and communications alive, because surviving day 1 makes outside help on day 2 more plausible. Big crises rarely start with a formal announcement. They often begin with one small incident spiraling out of control. Imagine this: Chinese fighter jets are trailing a US patrol plane, something they've done before. But this time, one wrong move causes a mid-air collision. Both sides rush to rescue their crews. Within hours, destroyers are on station and statements harden. No one intended a fight. Now backing down looks like weakness. A high-profile US or European visit to Taipei triggers weeks-long exercises. Warships encircle, flights reroute, insurance spikes. Taiwan burns fuel and focus to keep lanes open. A single misread radar track can turn a drill into a blockade. 2 undersea cables go down the same morning. At the same time, a cyberattack hits parts of Taiwan's power grid. Is it just harassment or the first move in something bigger? In that kind of uncertainty, leaders make quick decisions, and quick decisions can be the wrong ones. As Taiwan is the heart of advanced semiconductor production, if that stops, US factories from Texas to Michigan feel it within weeks. Stock markets drop, supply chains freeze, and political pressure to act builds, often faster than diplomacy can catch up. Most of the time, calm and rational decision-makers manage to take control of the situation. The fear is the day they don't. In waters crowded with US, Chinese, Taiwanese, Japanese, and Philippine forces, and global markets ready to panic, the gap between an incident and a full war is razor thin. You know, what the public sees are headlines and clips, but what matters are checklists. Beijing's list starts with speed. Overwhelm Taiwan in the opening hours before help can arrive, so leaders and citizens feel resistance is hopeless. Taipei's list starts with survival. Endure the first strikes, keep fighting, keep the lights on, and show allies we'll still be here tomorrow. Washington's list starts with distance and risk. The US can bring carriers, submarines, long-range bombers, and eyes in space, but getting close means entering China's missile envelope. That's why you hear about agile combat employment, spreading jets across smaller runways, submarine-heavy tactics, long-range anti-ship weapons, and pre-positioned fuel and spares on Okinawa and Guam, where tens of thousands of American service members and families live within missile range. Japan worries about its southwest islands, Yonaguni, Ishigaki, so close to Taiwan that any blockade touches Japanese waters. Tokyo is adding longer-range missiles and hardening bases. Australia leans on submarines, surveillance, and long-range strike under AUKUS, plus the boring but vital peace, moving fuel and parts across the Pacific. The Philippines has opened additional access sites near the Bashi-Luzon choke points south of Taiwan, key ground for resupply and for pushing back at a blockade. If a spark flies in this kind of battle space, the blast doesn't stop at the shoreline. A Taiwan fight would begin in Asia, but it wouldn't stay there. The United States moves first. The instant US and Chinese forces trade fire, the world's 2 largest militaries are in open conflict. That alone shakes markets and nerves. Japan gets pulled in by geography. Any blockade or missile exchange risks crossing into Japanese waters or airspace. Under its alliance with the US, Tokyo would likely act. Air patrols, missile defense, logistics, even strikes if Japanese territory is hit. Australia and the Philippines extend the map. Australian subs and surveillance aircraft shape the wider fight. Philippine bases host US aircraft and logistics. That makes those bases targets and turns the Luzon-Bashi corridor into a second front. Europe watches the Pacific and its own factories. NATO nations have ships in the region more often now, and a semiconductor shock hits Europe hard. Even without firing a shot, European governments would face pressure from industry, markets, and allies to take a stand. This is how a regional war tilts global, not all at once, but step by step. Strikes, counters, allies pulled in, economies jolted, cyber effects that ignore borders. And as more countries trade blows, the odds of a mistake that no one can walk back go up. So if the worst day comes, how does the slide toward a world war actually look? And how do leaders slam the brakes? See, no one plans a world war. You drift toward it. Sometimes it's a blockade that goes too far, a Chinese patrol boarding the wrong ship, a warning shot that finds its mark, or a precision strike meant to cripple Taiwan's command, but it hits civilians or an allied base. Maybe it's an amphibious push across the strait. slow, messy, and met with mines, missiles, and submarines. However it starts, the pattern is the same. One hit leads to another. Strikes widen, cyberattacks spread, satellites are blinded, and words like incident give way to war. Nuclear submarines vanish beneath the seas, and leaders face choices they swore they'd never make. There are escape routes, hotlines, ceasefires, mediators, but in the rush of battle, they're hard to see. And that's the fear, not that someone will plan a world war, but that no one will stop it in time. In the end, this isn't just about Taiwan. It's about whether the world can stop a regional crisis from becoming the war that defines or ends this century. Strip away the acronyms and the range rings, and you see people, families on Okinawa and Guam, crews at sea. A spark in one corner now touches all of us faster than ever. If this helped you see the whole picture, not just the headlines, help us keep doing it. Share this, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe. It tells the algorithm that calm, fact-driven reporting matters, and it lets us make the next one before the next crisis makes the news.